you, George, for thinking about him this morning. And thank you, Al, for your reading. Where'd you go? Yeah, thank you. There's so much gratitude I feel for all of you for this moment to be gathered here together. Let us just take a moment to settle our hearts and minds, that we might open them up to receive and learn more of what God is calling us to do with our lives. Thank you. I don't know how that second passage that Al was sharing with you struck you, but I want to say that when I was a child, there were two instances that stood out in my mind that really scared me. One was when I was walking down a street corner with my parents, and maybe it was New York or maybe it was Washington. It was a city. And I remember seeing a man with a placard wearing this sign, and it said, "The end of the world is near." And he was shouting to people, "Repent, you gotta get ready." And I was little, and that really impressed me in quite a negative way. I mean, I just got started. I don't want it to be over yet. And then another time was when I was visiting family. My family was up visiting relatives in Niagara Falls. Actually, it was right around that Love Canal area, as a matter of fact, where they lived. And on the TV, there was an announcer speaking to the audience and those in our room about this cloud. They showed an image of a cloud, and it looked like Jesus in the cloud. They were pointing out. And then I know very little about this, but I know the impression it made in me, because people in the room must have started talking about the second coming. And again, it was one of those other moments. It's like, well, wait, is that true? And again, I'm not ready. I'm just a kid. And I didn't understand it all. And without having conversations with anyone that really explained that to me and helped me understand it, I was scared. But then again, as a child, you kind of have moments like that, and then you go on, and you forget about it, and you go play with your toys and with your friends, and life goes on. But then as I got a little older, I started reading this passage in Matthew and Luke, and maybe you know some of it, where it says about nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there'll be earthquakes, and there'll be famine, and oh my gosh. Those are pretty unsettling, to say the least, especially being aware of such strife, actually, that was going on. And we've seen it happening. We've seen famines, we've seen earthquakes, we've seen devastation, we've seen nations fighting with each other, and it's been going on for a long time. And quite frankly, that it has been true about that. It's been followed through human nature, right? Human history, that seemed like the end is right around the corner if we take those words literally, like the people did in the early church that Paul was speaking to. As Al expressed, they were shaken and alarmed at what was being told to them. They weren't sure what to make of it all, because see, Paul had told them about the end times, but when Paul was absent, others came in and said, hey, it's right now, and the rapture's coming any minute. The early Christians in Thessalonica had built their theological foundation upon Paul's teaching about Jesus, but in Paul's absence, as I said, others came in and shared something different. And he says to them, don't be shaken and alarmed. Don't be worried about this. Think about what I told you. That day is not coming now. But they were worried, and they even wondered whether they ought to just stop doing anything, and just kind of sit around and wait. Why bother putting any effort into anything? And I can imagine that Paul must have been pretty frustrated and felt really disappointed at hearing this news, that these people he had guided were starting to head into a different direction and start to question a lot of things and be afraid. You see, misinformation was happening back then too, despite the fact that there was no social media that we have available to us today. Deception and twisted truth only serves to generate doubt and fear. And that's exactly what was happening among these early Christians who were just finding their way as followers of Jesus' teachings. And Paul writes to them and he says, "Let no one deceive you in any way. Hold on to what I've taught you. Hold fast and stand firm in the teachings of grace and of love that are in Jesus, instead of unnecessary fear and worry about this time that is beyond our understanding, but be about the work you have been called to do." Now, the majority of us have lived long enough to have heard of predictions and end times, several times in our lifetimes, that ultimately did not come to fruition, thank goodness, right? We're not ready. But do you remember Y2K even? I think of all of us here can remember Y2K, that scare, when we were so afraid that the computer programs weren't going to be able to turn around to the year 2000. And some people were so concerned that they went out and stocked up on food and water, on firearms and on money. They went to the bank and withdrew a lot because they weren't sure that they were going to be able to access it. And whether we did any of those things or not, and it's not a judgment whatsoever, there was a general sense of unease around the world. And then New Year's Eve came. And the ball fell right at Times Square. 2000 was ushered in, and we made it. You know, throughout history, there have been those caught up in this idea of the apocalypse, the end times. Some use it, even still, as a justification for jumping on board and getting faith, right, before it's too late. But I'm not questioning the importance of right living and getting it and jumping into the faith. I'm not questioning having integrity and honesty and compassion and kindness, faithfulness, and a life dedicated to doing good whenever and wherever possible. That is what following the ways of love, as Jesus demonstrated, is all about. That's what we come to talk about on Sundays and learn how we can do a better job at that. But the truth is that we don't come by this lifestyle of faith by fear. Fear of the what if? What if that end time is tomorrow? We come by such living through a personal conviction derived from our unique and individual encounters with grace, unconditional love. Faithful living does not come to us by fear of the unknown, but by evidence of the unfolding goodness that we witness day after day. We don't sign on to our faith because it's the right thing to do, but because we have been touched by a love so great that accepts us for who we are, a love that embraces us in this very moment. Misplaced fear and worry are not the building blocks of faith, but trust and the conviction that good prevails over bad, love over hate, joy over fear, hope over despair. In the first church that I've served, I've referenced them periodically, there was a lovely couple, Harry and Esther Fletcher. Harry was retired, they both were retired, and Harry served as the custodian in our church. His wife Esther was a very kind, sweet woman who offered her support in the church whatever way she possibly could. But she was a worrier. She was a worrier of warriors, really. Always questioning herself, holding back. She had a deep sense of insecurity, and the more I knew her history, I understood that. but she just could not stop worrying. And as a matter of fact, Harry chuckled with me one time. He said, oh, if she's not worried, she's worried about not being worried. We might know people like that. And Paul urged the people to put their fear and their worry aside. For the immediate attributes of praise and gratitude, what a difference that makes, praise and gratitude, that they have already experienced in God's abiding love. Hold fast and stand firm in what you have been taught, he reminds them. Don't fall into the trap of worry and despair about that which you have no control. Paul's instructions to the people reminds me of Dr. Reinhold Niebuhr's prayer that has been known and gone down through the ages as the Serenity Prayer. Oh God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Life presents us with a lot of things to worry about and to be fearful of. We all wrestle in our attempts to find our purpose in life, to avoid strife, hardship, and pain. We want to control how life happens to us. And yet we know there is much in life that we can do little about, if anything. Circumstances happen beyond our control. The patterns of the universe are what they are. We cannot change them no matter all the worry and fretting we muster. Some things are unchangeable by our power, and learning to accept and live in that truth brings freedom. And as we heard Al share in the psalm this morning, David's prayer of just finding trust and confidence in God helps to assuage those worries and those fears. But I have to say, on the other hand, as I thought about this message today, I could not help but think about the circumstances our country is in right now. The deadlock in Washington, D.C., and how the decisions of others are creating deep suffering for many. It's affecting all of us, really, perhaps in different ways, but every one of us faces the hardships coming from these times, and we cannot turn away. Nor can we not worry and be fearful for ourselves and for our neighbors. These are different than the unproductive worries the people Paul was addressing were concerned about. These are immediate and very tangible worries that we can do something about. These are worries we must do something about. These are worries that ought not stymie our actions, but stir us to act, to muster the courage to change the things we can, as the Serenity Prayer says. Dig deep and find the courage to use our position to bring about positive change. While I might not be afraid of how I am going to feed my family this week, there are those in our community who are. While I might not be worried about our access to health care, there are people around us who are. While we may not have to worry about making choices on how we're going to pay the bills and heat our homes, there are many who are in that position right now. For me to suggest anyone in these positions not to worry is irresponsible. To say not to fear is unconscionable. Worry, of course. Fear, naturally. But unlike those things beyond our abilities, these we can do something about. Now, I'm well aware that those who are immediately impacted often, our concern really pales to their profound worry and their struggle to find, even amidst all of this, their own voice to speak for themselves. If you have ever been in such a place of despair, then you know what that's like and how debilitating it can be. Not only is it hard to find your voice, but there's an emotional paralysis that holds us down. And yet, this is where the beauty and power of community shines. For our faith, and quite frankly, the fulfillment of our personal lives, mandates that we use our abilities, our talents, our resources, our courage to stand in the place of our neighbors in order to allow all voices to be heard. Paul encourages his followers to continue forward, comforting their hearts and strengthening them in good work and word. That is a call to us. There are things we can't change in this life. So there is no use worrying about them, really. And then there are things we can. And in these, the purpose of our lives is manifest in doing what makes a positive difference. Finding grace and the power of the Spirit within us that does not sit idly waiting, but where change is possible, moves us forward, standing firm and holding fast to all that we have been given and all that we are able to give.